Ukraine, unlike Russia, cannot produce its own weaponry.
Of course it can.
Everybody's making drones.
The society is producing more drones for the front line than the government is.
Europe are getting ready to a potential war with Russia.
Those who are unprepared are the ones who get smacked. The threat to NATO is already as it is. Anybody who thinks otherwise is a fool.
India is a great example of smart diplomacy.
India is the one country in the world that has the capacity to support Ukraine to win now.
Hi, my name is Alina Hrytsenko. I am an international relations expert, and this is Talking Substance, where we simplify the significant. And my guest today is Mr. Glen Grant, who is a defense expert working for Baltic Security Forum. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
The topic of today's discussion, so we're going to discuss the war, the current situation on the front lines, what we can get out of that public information that we receive daily from the media. We're going to discuss some tendencies that one can highlight from that information. Of course, you as a defense expert understand the subject a lot better. I would like to share a couple of ideas that I've been thinking of, that I've been pondering of lately. I've been noticing two contradictory narratives in the media. One of them is totally pessimistic. The headlines are so in the Western media, basically, most of the time. So the headline is that Ukraine is going to lose war this year already, which, of course, has its own reasons. The headline has its own reasons because we all understand the situation on the front lines is aggravating. Is worsening day after day because the weaponry stocks depleted. We do understand that Russia is producing more and more weaponry. It has its own fundamental, its own base for producing weaponry, because this is what Russia has been doing for decades, producing its own weaponry for its own purposes and also selling it to other countries like India, for example. So Ukraine is outgunned by Russian artillery. We are observing a difficult situation in the Donetsk region, in Chasiv Yar. And about Chasiv Yar, this is, I have seen that already with Bakhmut and Avdiivka, then when the media start articulating different narratives that, the situation is drastic, but we will still have some hope that Ukrainian armed forces could potentially stand and keep the city. But at the same time, at the end of the day, the Russian forces are able to attack and are able to occupy the city. So this is one side of the coin, so to speak, the pessimistic one, which has its own reasons, absolutely objective reasons. And another narrative is an optimistic one, because we still have some other media. We still have General Budanov, and he's later interviewed for BBC Ukrainian, where he stated that, yes, the situation is potentially going to be difficult, but not catastrophic. So one thing is that it has this, we're all getting ready for a potential Russian offensive within a month or two, which has its own reasons, because the Putin's inauguration is going to happen soon in May, right before the Victory Day. So one can suggest that the Russians are going to intensify their attacks in order to gain some victory, to sell that to their own society. So one narrative is like Armageddon is coming. Another narrative is that there's still a beacon of hope. So what tendencies can you highlight, actually? So is it so that we have to prepare ourselves for a collapse, and we have to prepare ourselves for losing? And losing means freezing the conflict, freezing the front lines, stop the hostilities.
Yeah, it's a lot more complex, I think, even than you're mentioning. I mean, if you actually ask, are we losing? Well, on the ground, things are not going well.
Right.
Okay, they're not going well. We know that. And there's a high chance that the front line will go back even more than it is at the moment, and it may keep going back for another year. But that doesn't mean that you're losing.
Right.
because this is all. You have to first of all look at the systems that we're actually using. We've got Navy. We're actually doing a lot of damage to the Russian Navy, much more than they want. And in the air, the boys are doing absolutely unbelievably. You know, they are fighting above their level on a ratio of 5-6 to 1 in air defence.
Right.
The air defence is frankly has produced probably the best air defence ever in the history of the world. So when you look at those things, okay, then there's a lot of pluses against the negatives. But the war is not won just on the front line. The war is won by industry. The war is won by government actually focusing everything that the country is doing towards winning. The problem is that Russia is and Ukraine isn't. Ukraine is still living in a what do you want to call it, phony wartime. The government is still is not even remotely focusing the country upon winning the war. Whether that's because they're frightened of electors, you know, they want to keep power. Whether it's because, as some people say, that you know they're fighting for Russia. Whether it's because they just don't know what they're doing. It's probably a combination of all of them. But at the moment, Ukraine is still only, I would say, 25-30% geared up for fighting. Russia is working towards 90-100%. So one shouldn't just look at the front line. One should look behind the front line, actually saying, what are people doing? And that's the bit that makes the difference. Now, am I positive? Yeah, we're still going to win. It's just going to take a bit more time until the Ukrainian society and the Ukrainian government actually get their act together.
Yeah, when I say losing, I mean that when I say losing, I mean that we're not going to achieve the goals that were publicly spoke by the Ukrainian leadership.
No, we're not. There's no chance because they're not fighting it.
The 1991 borders,
they're setting goals without doing the work. You know, if you set goals and don't do the work, of course you don't achieve them. You have to, you know, the front line needs ammunition, it needs people, we need better diplomacy out in the world, not choosing friends to be diplomats, but actually choosing the best people in the country to go to each country, the relevant people for each country. You know, this is fighting a war. During the American War of Independence, they sent the founding fathers to Europe, the founding fathers to raise money and to do the diplomacy. So you've got people like John Adams spending his time in the Netherlands, scrounging every penny that he could get for the country. You know, the man who wrote the Constitution is in the Netherlands so that the country can win. And what are we doing? Sending failures.
Why do you think so?
Because I know so. I can see the result.
But still,
you have someone who works in the defence ministry and fails, and then you send them off to be a defence attaché, to be an ambassador. I'm sorry, that is not a clever way of working.
So you think that General Zelensky...
No, I don't think Zelensky. Zelensky hasn't failed. Zelensky was removed, rightly or wrongly. That's a government choice, and it's always the president's choice to choose who should lead the army. And you actually have to change people over anyway because they get tired.
Right.
You cannot fight 2 years solidly and not be tired. So there's always got to be a changeover for freshening people up. But you've got to choose people that are good. You can't.
Actually, speaking about freshening people up, we still have a problem with the people on the front lines because some of them have been working for 2 years and the mechanism is definitely not working. So
this goes back to what I'm saying about the government still not fighting 100% of the country. So it's still trying to fight a war with peacetime methods. And that decision about how to freshen up the army should have been taken 18 months ago. But people were thinking, we're going to win. All these wonderful weapons coming from America, forgetting that the whole thing is about the human being, the training for the human being, the motivation of the human being. You can't motivate people just by giving them medals and more money. That doesn't work. They have to know that the system that they're in, the people they're fighting for, are all fighting on their side and working for them. That is called leadership. And if the leadership is deficient, then the motivation goes.
But the American weaponry that you mentioned is also very important because Ukraine, unlike Russia, cannot produce its own weaponry.
Of course it can. Of course it can.
It's quite difficult to start the process
no,
because,
it's not. It's not. We were making missiles before. We've made aircraft, biggest aircraft in the world. Don't tell me you can make the biggest aircraft in the world.
But that's been like decades ago.
Yeah, but so what? The people are still there. I'm pretty sure that most of the people who are involved in things like that and in the missile program that was there before are still alive and around somewhere. It is not impossible to do these things. Every country has to do it in war. You have to get your best engineers. What are the best engineers doing now? They're making drones. They could be making other things as well.
Everybody's making drones
Everybody's making drones, yes, which just says that you can make weapons. We've got people making armoured personnel carriers. We've got a company making armoured personnel carriers. We've got a company making off-road vehicles. But is the government involved in making sure that those things are things going into the army? No. Because there's no system, because we're not at war. So, I'm sorry, that's the 25%. The 75% is sitting there. It's latent Ukrainian power, the character of people, the skills of people. And there's massive skills in Ukraine. You need to go and start asking questions. How do you do this? What did you do? How did you do this? But nobody does that.
The picture looks like that's what everybody does, especially our diplomats, because it looks like they're all over, they're asking for help. And there's also a lot of criticism towards Ukraine that, oh my God, you're not doing anything yourself. You're just asking others people to send you this and send you that. And it looks like our diplomacy is working quite well. Don't you think so?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. No, I don't at all. No, I don't. I mean, I think that the diplomacy is about a lot more than just getting things from people. It's about the whole international relations, the whole of the how you fight back against Russian stories, how you actually get in the press and how you defeat those arguments with the public. And it's quite a complex issue. It's quite a complex issue. It's also about giving things. It's not just about taking, it's about giving. What have you got to offer? What has Ukraine got to offer and how does it offer it?
But there's not much we can offer
until the war is over. You're fighting a war. You're fighting a war. You've got all the things you know about fighting the war and what you've learned.
Yeah, but that's one thing. At the same time, that's what we're doing. We
share the experience. Things you learn about business, what you've learned about trying to integrate business in war, all the things about society helping and supporting, which is it's not new. If you go back in history and look at something like, say, the Battle of Alma on Crimea back in the the days,
right,
then you actually find that society bought loads of food and things out for the soldiers on the front line in Crimea from Britain. And one guy actually, hired a ship and filled it up with goods and bought it out. So society helping the front line is not new in any way, shape or form. But it's modern now. It's new. It's got new things to it. And those things are things that other countries need to know. Because, you've got all these other countries now who are on the frontline states, for example. So you have a lot to offer of explaining to them how society is supporting and what the problems are. What the problems are, the relationship between government and society in cases like this. These are really complex things that other countries don't understand, are the problems of it. So, other countries will, how do I deal with society being part of the army logistics system? In this country, society is a major part of the logistics system. And at the moment, with the battles on the front line, the society is producing more drones for the front line than the government is. So that's an important thing to offer, to talk about, not just as a failure, but as a success of the country.
The question popped up in my mind that if we are able to share our experience of waging war, of making business during war, and things like that, doesn't that mean that those countries that are interested in this experience are actually getting ready to start a war anytime soon?
Well, they should be.
Do you believe in a potential full-scale war in Europe between...
It doesn't matter whether I believe it.
It
doesn't matter whether one believes it. You have to be prepared for it. We are at war. Russia is already waging war against the West and in Europe in as many unconventional ways as it can. whether that's cutting wires under the sea, whether it's whether it's assassinating people.
But can that evolve in a full-scale war?
Do you know? I don't.
But there are some tendencies that can
There's some
tell
tendencies
us,
historically, that some symptoms and some tendencies that say that this is a likelihood. And if you don't prepare for something that is that serious, then it's going to happen. It's those who are unprepared are the ones who get smacked. You know, you have to be prepared for it.
Is Britain getting ready for it and getting prepared for it?
They've just this week,
with the news,
they've just this week announced an extremely large increase to the defence budget over the next couple of years. Now, whether that's quick enough, I don't know. But as you know, Germany with 100 billion. But that was actually only enough money to pay back the debt of the system that was broken. So they're going to have to put more money in if they actually want to improve and get themselves ready for war.
What I was thinking about is the people, because in Germany, in Bundeswehr, they do not have the mandatory enlisting in army service like we do here in Ukraine. And in UK, it was a couple of months ago, as far as I remember, there was big news about new ways of enlisting people. That was, I'm not sure who exactly was that. I do not remember the name. From the general staff, I guess, who publicly stated that Britain is going to enlist people, I guess, mandatory, and there were a lot of young people who criticized the news, if you remember that.
Yeah, I do. And it wasn't necessarily saying that they were going to, it's saying that we probably need to be absolutely clear we're ready for it. Mm-hmm. You see, I mean, conscription is just one method of getting people in. And then you have the challenge of when you bring people in, it changes the dynamic of the army completely. Mm-hmm. As it has with Ukraine, because you bring in people who are clever, you bring in people who've got huge skills, business skills, leadership skills, engineering skills, and you have to be able to adapt them into a new system so that you use those skills. Ukraine hasn't done that. Ukraine's brought them in and they've been infantry, which was a stopgap. Now, if you want to win, that has to start using the intelligence of people and the leadership of people and turn the country from a professional, old-style Soviet military into a people's military, which means thinking differently. It means using people for their skills, which is what we did in World War II with Great Britain and America. So in America, they took senior business people, put lots of rank on their shoulder and said, get on with the logistics. We did exactly the same in Britain. The man who did the logistics for D-Day was a civilian made into a colonel to do the logistics for D-Day. Mm-hmm. So you took a professional logistician. And you know, the countries have got to be able to do that. Will Britain do it? They're thinking about it. I think that's the best one could say. Is that quick enough? No. I think people actually need to move a bit quicker and take the risk of increasing the size of the armies now, because otherwise you won't have time for training. And then you end up, as Ukraine has, never enough time to train people to a proper standard. Mm-hmm. So then they die too quickly.
Okay.
And that we don't want that. Nobody wants that. So, you know, people need this 15, 20, 25 weeks of training to get them the right mentality, to get them the right skills, to be able to stay alive in the battlefield.
So that's a symptom that Britain, Europe are getting ready to a potential war with Russia. And the same, like Admiral Lieutenant Bauer also stated that Europe has to be ready for war and every single family has to be ready for war. Yeah. So we can clearly see some symptoms and tendencies that some ominous symptoms. But what's with the Russia? Because Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu addressed the MOD Minister of Defense, Russian Minister of Defense Collegium just this week, and he announced this huge news about S-500 that are gonna develop. That they have been developing for several years now, and designing and developing, which is so. That can be a potential threat, and is is this announcement can be a potential threat towards NATO? Like we are still getting ready for a full-scale war with Europe, and Ukraine is just the first step in this year in this war with the full-scale war in Europe.
Well, I think that the threat to NATO is there's nothing new. It's not going to change. The threat to NATO is already as it is. So it's there. I mean, it's quite clear it's there. Anybody who thinks otherwise is a fool. So, producing a new weapon system, well, they're going to do that all the time. That's some parts of Russian industry are quite good.
Which means the sanctions do not work properly.
The technical parts, the electronic warfare and missiles and things, those parts of industry seem to have stayed pretty good. Some parts have failed, like tank production.
And they're still getting parts and spare
and
parts
they're still getting parts
from
from the West. Oh, yes, they are. They're getting parts from the West.
So the sanctions do not work. They still can circumvent.
No, they don't. They don't. And they're getting parts from China.
What's the sense of this mechanism of sanctions? I mean,
the sense of the mechanism, the mechanism is the right mechanism. The problem is that the sanctions were still put in with peacetime thinking.
Okay.
So they're not backed up by hard enough and aggressive enough wartime thinking penalties from the West, because we're still being nice. We think we're drifting into it, and each time we realise that what we've done before is not actually working properly, we have to go up another level. Getting ammunition doesn't work the first time. We have to go up another level and think about it. And so the West is constantly going up, but it's going up slower than Russia is. Russia is 100% committed to winning this war, not the war with Ukraine, the war with the West. Mm-hmm. The war with Ukraine is like the war with Ukraine and Russia reminds me of the war of Germany in Spain in the Second World War. So you're using it to improve your own defense forces for the next stage, for the big stage. That is how I feel this is going. So Ukraine is the training ground. What comes out of Ukraine is going to be a hardened army on Russian side, because those who stay alive are going to be good.
There's also a question how long can we keep on waging this war? Because
we have to keep waging it as long as it takes.
But I mean, how? Because
there's no how. We've got lots of money. We're not short of money.
The weaponry stock's depleted, and European countries and the United States.
Then we have to build more weapons. It's as simple as that. This is how you win wars.
But look at the go back. To win your weapons,
It is simple. You've got all the car industries in America. What did they do in the Second World War? They made planes. Okay, planes now are more complex than they were in the Second World War. But, modern cars are complex as well. Elon Musk if he can make cars, he can make planes. Perhaps we don't want him to make planes.
Exactly.
But this is about will. This is about political will, and it's about understanding that we have to do something.
But we're still heavily dependent on.
We are reopening lines in different countries now for air defense missiles. But they need to not just to reopen them; they need to actually to put money in to expand them, because we're going to need them.
Exactly. We are heavily dependent on the Western aid, the Western weaponry, but they still...
Ukraine is. The West isn't.
Right. But they still... there's going to be one day when they say, like, okay, we've done enough. We've given you enough. We have to ramp up our production.
Who said that? Where did you get that idea from?
That's
you just made that up. You just made that idea up.
But that can happen one day because...
Maybe, if you don't do anything. If you stay on 25% and you don't declare war and you don't prepare the country for war, at some stage people will get really, really tired of this.
How can we declare war if nobody declared war on us? Russia didn't declare war.
Because you can declare war.
But they didn't.
It doesn't matter whether they do. They are at war with you. They've invaded you. So this is a peacetime
thing. But this is illegal thing.
No, it's not legal. You are allowed to declare war on any country that invades you. Go to the UN Charter and read it. You have nothing stopping Ukraine declaring war on Russia at all. Not anything. You have been invaded. Not once, not twice, but effectively 3 times since 2014. And each time it's got worse. And still the government is trying to run the country in peacetime mode.
But there's also the society who potentially is not ready to.
Well, but this is what a government is there for. It's a government's job to get society ready for winning a war, not for losing a war. Otherwise, what's the point of the government?
Every step that they're trying to make, with the mobilization law, is heavily criticized by society.
Yes, because the law is rubbish. Not because the law is wrong, but because it's rubbish. Because it's badly written. Because it's got 4,000 amendments. No law that's well written should have 4,000 amendments, which means it was badly written in the first place. Who wrote it? No, nor do I. Does anybody know who wrote it? But it's not a good law because it was badly written, badly thought out, because society were not engaged at the beginning. You don't make laws without engaging society, and in a war, definitely so. You have to engage society. What should this law include? What should the rules be? What should the standards and levels be? And you let the best people in society write their comments first, not write the law first and then get comments on a bad law afterwards. And are we doing this? Yes. Security service law is just the same. It's an appalling law. It's an appalling law that contradicts itself through. Line after line is contradictory about what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. And it's a bad law. It needs rewriting from the beginning by someone with a brain, not trying to amend a bad law.
And how do you assess the later news about the cancellation of consular services for those Ukrainians who live abroad?
I only make.
Is it an instrument get them back?
But I only make the comment that the week before, the foreign ministry had put their paper out about looking after diaspora and
yes, exactly,
and loving Ukraine and everything else.
Abroad.
Well, I mean, the two things are contradictory, aren't they? So I shall not comment on it. I should just say they are contradictory, which means that people are not thinking through these things sufficiently hard before they actually make the decisions. Again, was that put to society? No. If you make a law without society holding, it's a bad law. It's guaranteed to be a bad law. Because law is about what society will accept and what society will wear. And if they won't wear something, then it's a law that's not going to work. So you have to engage, government has to engage society of Ukraine about fighting a war.
The society is getting tired and the morale is aggravating. And these are symptoms. These are not causes.
The symptoms,
these are symptoms. How can you inspire people to fight the war?
It's called leadership. It's called leadership.
When the society is getting tired.
It's called leadership. Of course they're getting tired. That's why you need leadership.
Okay. So you said that we have to wage war as long as it needs to be waged.
The West certainly has to.
The Ukraine as well.
Ukraine as well and the West, both.
Right. So there's also a question of, it seems like Russia can wage this war forever, for the whole eternity. But at the same time, those rules and symptoms that are working in Ukraine does not work in Russia because the societies are different. So we're still able to criticize the government and to criticize the leadership and to say that a bad law is a bad law. But in Russia, that's not how things work.
They don't even think about law.
So they can actually wage this war for whole eternity. But is there any chance that one day the Russian leadership think that, okay, so this conventional war is not the proper instrument of achieving goals, why shouldn't we go for a preemptive nuclear strike?
No, I don't think so. I think they know that that's the end of the game for everybody.
So that's going to be a last resort for them?
That will be, no, I don't even think it's a last resort.
I mean, using a nuclear weapon
I don't think it's a last resort. I don't even think they'd think about using it. I think they would just go for much more...
just blackmailing,
Yeah, they go for many... they're blackmailing now, but they blackmail even more. But I think that, that Russia sees at the moment that its blunt military instrument is working. To a large degree. I mean, it's not working at the sea because they are 30 years behind in terms of technology for their ships, and their training and everything is appalling. So they're not going to do well there. In the air, they still only have, third, fourth generation fighters and third and fourth generation equipment. So at some stage, if the West is involved, there will be a huge next level things that will frighten the life out of them.
Yeah, well, like if the West
but this is part of Russia's game. So at the moment, what they will want to do is not bring the West into the war until they can, until they're absolutely ready, and that means they would have to get Ukraine first.
So they're still preparing for the full-scale war with the West.
and that 10, 15 years away maybe. Not necessarily, we beat Ukraine and then we rush off and attack someone else. Because this is, you think back to Chechnya. It's quite a long time ago.
Right.
And Georgia, quite a long time ago. So you've got to think in those time frames. But since Georgia, they've been getting themselves ready. Actually, since Chechnya, they've been getting themselves ready and trying to improve and trying to change. They've gone back to the blunt instrument because it's working. Lots of people, low-level weapons, cheap, nasty, and use as much. And we have got sophistication. But we're finding at the moment that sometimes that sophistication doesn't work. In air defense, hey, it works brilliantly. It's awesome.
Do you think F-16 is going to change the situation?
It'll change it in some way. I'm not sure how it will change it because that depends upon the doctrine.
Right.
The doctrine chosen by the Air Force and by the defense staff. And if the doctrine's wrong, we lose a lot of F-16s in the first week.
Right.
If the doctrine's right, then it'll be a game changer somewhere. But the Russia thing is interesting in that the only way we can beat them is two things. Is first of all, is the sanctions have got to be made to work, to squeeze them in some way so that they don't get all these spare parts. And that means diplomacy with China. It means making a diplomacy with North Korea.
Right.
It means diplomacy with Iran. And
India.
It means very much with India. Very, very much, because India is the one country in the world that has the capacity to support Ukraine to win now, because it's got enough equipment, enough ammunition, and enough bits, spare parts.
But their neutrality
is very strange. Well, there are signs that some of that neutrality is not as neutral as we like, and that they're actually helping Ukraine in some ways. But also they also seem to be not cutting their Russia ties. So they're playing a duplicitous game.
But this is a great example of diplomacy, I believe, because they were able to withstand the pressure from the United States. I remember that back in 2022, there were several U.S. politicians that were coming to India talking about Russia. Like,
that's bad diplomacy.
But India was managed to withstand it, still kept on,
of course,
making business with Russia.
Absolutely, but this goes back to diplomacy.
Buying weaponry from Russia, still managing this bilateral project on BrahMos missiles, sending them to Philippines.
Yeah.
But they are now trying to.
But if you run your diplomacy by sending people in, that is not diplomacy. That's bullying. Okay, diplomacy is about making friends.
Yeah,
and
but
it's a long-term.
I was talking about India. Like, this is a good example.
India,
yeah,
it's a long-term game,
right?
Which means you've got to have really good people, because they've got to win the game with all political sides. They've got to be friends with people to the degree that they don't want to let someone down. You've got to be part of the home team, in effect. And that American way of sending people in, sending the Undersecretary of State, it's bullying. It doesn't work.
Okay.
Unless you've got, an iron fist and you say, we're not, like with Egypt, we're not going to give you $2 billion a year. Okay, but that's bullying as well.
And I just see how the situation is changing, because even last year we were hoping on China. Remember President Macron coming to Beijing asking Xi Jinping to get some pressure on Russia so Russia could stop, blackmailing the world and other things. The situation changed because nobody has hopes on China, for that matter. Everybody's trying to involve India in the process. Foreign Minister Kuleba, trip to India. Now we're all talking about inviting India to the Peace Summit happening in Switzerland. Still little hope on China. India is a great example of smart diplomacy. And now India has a reputation of the global South leader, in fact. Still making business with Russia.
It does. But remember that India's got drawbacks as well, the weaknesses as well, especially on agriculture, which Ukraine has got.
Yes.
So there are, we've got tools to use there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But China needs food as well. And these are also areas where negotiation can take place. And don't forget, China badly needs its relationship with the European Union and America for finance.
Exactly.
For business.
But that's what we've been observing.
Therefore, they are on a very tight line with sanctions.
But that's what I noticed during Chancellor Scholz's visit to China. There was not enough about Ukraine, which Chancellor Scholz was not supposed to talk about Ukraine. Actually, there was not much he could change. It all was about investment, economy, trade. He had the whole, I don't know, army of businessmen with him.
The whole 9 yards, as we say.
With him on board, traveling to Shanghai and Shenzhen in China. So that was all about trade, investment, economy, production, cars, automobiles, and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and not about political things. And European countries individually are being more friendly towards China than, for example, Ursula von der Leyen, who is quite tough on China, always mentions all these sensitive
but she
issues.
Hasn't got a country to answer to.
But she has the whole international relations actor.
Do you call that?
That's what the European Union is trying to represent itself. It's hard, but it's trying to find its place in the world.
But it's really difficult because it doesn't represent the countries. It can only represent the collective. And if the collective is not a collective in some way, then it makes it very, very difficult for the European Union to act. I mean, they don't have the tools. They don't have the organization, for example. So we talked about, we get 1 million rounds of ammunition. They just don't have the tools to produce that. It's the same, European defense. European defense is based upon a country taking the lead and running with it. So if you want 1 million rounds of ammunition, a country has to do that. Because the European Union just doesn't have it doesn't have the capacity. Mm-hmm. I mean, you see, Borrell talks about it, and then he goes back, and then who does he give it to? He doesn't have that sort of organisation that is actually able to do that. Okay, you've got the European Defence Agency, but European Defence Agency is not actually buying for Europe; it's buying collectively for groups of countries most of the time. So Europe is in quite a difficult, challenging position in that respect, because it's not a country, and it's not the United States of Europe. It's still only a political collective.
Yeah, but at the same time, so there are countries individually, for example, we consider Germany or France fighting for leadership in Europe. We still do not observe any tendencies for them to take that leadership. I mean, President Macron is getting more decisive and determined in terms regarding Russian-Ukrainian war, but at the same time, in terms of communication with China, let alone North Korea, we're not talking about North Korea right now because nobody can find a right tool how to communicate with North Korea. There's still not enough communication on Ukraine.
But then you might actually say that the European
Union... Is it because China is not ready to do that?
No, I don't think it's anything to do with China. I think it's to do with the complexity of the European Union and countries. That this war has actually highlighted the split. What is the European Union responsibility and how much power comes out of that, and what are national responsibilities? And when you have the European Union, which is a collective, political collective, but has no power, then do the countries do something which might usurp what the European Union is trying to do, or should they take the lead? And the problem is, who takes the lead? There is no decision. Mm-hmm. So you've still got countries actually trying to, outdo each other almost. I mean, I'm not going to be that cynical, mm-hmm. but in a way, they're not sure whose responsibility. Nobody's given the responsibility of this, that, and the other to people, except we are starting now with the drone collective, with the F-16 collective, with the, but that's a country leading.
Right.
It's still actually not the European Union, and some of those collectives have got Canada inside. Mm-hmm. So, there's still the leadership of the support for this war is still fractured.
Right.
Nobody sat down and said, you need to do this, you need to do that. Because who can do that?
Well, President Macron is trying to represent himself as a new Napoleon.
No, he has. But, as people point out, the reality of the stuff actually crossing the line is still not is still not as his words are. So, there's talking the talk and walking the walk. And he is talking the talk. Now, we will see in the next couple of months whether France walks the walk and actually delivers what's needed. Because it's still Germany producing most. UK will produce more, but they haven't got it to produce because the military got so small that it actually just doesn't have the volume that Ukraine needs for a fight of this size.
Yeah, by the way, just remember the fact that UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is traveling to Germany, I guess, within a week or two, and he's going to talk about Ukraine as well. Do you suggest that potentially Prime Minister can talk about sending tourists?
Yeah, he will do. He will do. And the answer will still be no. Because Scholz has, I know what Britain has already said to them, that we'll buy them from you and then we'll give them. But
well, that's an option.
It's an option, but that's already been on the table. That was on the table 5 months ago. And Scholz has basically said no.
Isn't it going to happen the same like with Leopards, that they refused to supply us with Leopards with the tanks, but then eventually agreed?
No, this one I think it's
different?
It's different. I don't know why. I can guess.
Because we are potentially going to use those on the Russian territory.
And he doesn't want us to attack Russia. But there
are some, like we can attack Crimea, which is not Russia.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But maybe they don't trust the leadership to do that.
Okay.
But I don't know.
We could attack the bridge.
Nobody knows what is in Scholz's head.
Right, exactly.
It's not clear. I have read more papers about, this sort of subject than I can shake a stick at. And they are not contradictory. They are all just vague because analysts can't pin down what is his motivation, what is his real driver. Is it party politics, internal politics? Is it Russia, fear of Russia, money, the fact that they haven't got Taurus and they've been lying? Because don't forget, go back to the first Gulf War, Belgium didn't have any ammunition to give anybody. So they had to say, no, we can't give it. We're not going to give it to you. We're not going to give it to you. We can't give it to you because we haven't bought any spares or stocks. Maybe that's the same with Taurus. Maybe they haven't got any Taurus. Maybe it's a lie.
Okay.
We don't know. We don't know. Maybe he's holding off until someone says, okay, now we've got enough Taurus. Now the Tauruses are fixed because they're all missing some part or something,
But is there any alternative to Taurus? Perhaps there's some analogy in other countries that we could...
It's a missile.
Yeah,
you can make missiles. You can make them fly.
I do not understand anything in missiles, so...
The names don't matter. There are a lot. Missiles are things that go from A to B in the air. Either they're ballistic, which they go up in the air, or they fly flat and follow the terrain or whatever. They are makeable. There is always an alternative. There are always companies that can make something slightly different, that can adapt and make another Taurus.
Could we potentially produce missiles?
You could produce them, yes. Yeah, no question. You could produce them. You may have to close a couple of metro stations and build them downstairs.
But we need engineers, people, money,
You've got engineers. You've got
investment.
people. You need a government direction.
Space to build those.
Down in the metro. Close one of the metros and build downstairs. There's quite a lot of space down there. And missiles are buildable. You're already building missiles. You're already building drones that go on the water.
Neptune is also a missile,
It's wonderful. Okay. Truly, truly wonderful. Lots of countries in the world are going because of their navies, and they're thinking, what happens if the other side starts producing these? So if you can produce those, you can produce missiles. And you are producing missiles that go through the air. It's just a matter of producing a different one. And that means government initiative. It means the government said, produce another missile. How much money do you need? Make it. Not put it out to contract on and wait till 30 companies come in and say they can make it. You need direction. You change the law if necessary in wartime, and you need direct procurement, and you need a contract organization that actually says, this is what we want for the contract. Make it, we check it, get it to the front line, get it to whoever needs it within 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks. And that needs government direction. We don't have that system at the moment.
But is it even possible to build it hypothetically where waging war? Because you focus on so many different things, and how can you potentially build such a system when waging war? Because you have to learn it.
You're already building systems that are close to it.
Okay.
So if you're building systems that are close to it, it's just a matter of amendment of the system. It's like what planes did we start the war with in the Second World War? 5 years later, the planes were totally different. 5 years later, we had the first jet planes flying.
But the times were different.
The times are not. You can't say that. That's an excuse. The times are not different. We've got just as much engineering capability
now.
World
War.
Yes.
Not Russian-Ukrainian war?
Yeah, but then you have to use people in the West to help you. You have to actually get the Western companies, not just let money to Latvian, not just let money to Ukrainian companies and say, build this, but you have to go out to all the companies in the West, say, who can produce this and how quickly? I mean, the research and development for Ukraine primarily sits in Western businesses. It's in Rheinmetall. It's in Patria in Finland. These are the people who are doing the research and development. These are the people that can make things. You have to get them involved in it. You have to find the money to pay them. But then money to pay them, judging by the number of new cars around in Kyiv, is not actually that difficult. The money is there in systems, in ways of doing it. You stop spending. Why do we need 15,000 more border guard? Why are we going to waste money on 15,000 more border guard? I've come through the border, and every time I come through the border, there are far more people at the border working than are necessary. Far more. So we don't need 15,000.
Trying to identify potential Russian enemies?
No, they're not.
No, I'm just trying to explain it, finding
some ways to explain it. So we don't need 15,000 more border guard. That's a joke. So that money is wasted. That 15,000 money's worth could go on business somewhere. So this is about waging war. When you wage war, every penny counts. You can only spend money once. If you spend it on 15,000 border guard, you cannot spend it on a weapon system.
So it's all about planning.
It's about planning and being hard-nosed. Strategy and being hard-nosed about your money. Where does the money go? And every penny has to be saved, because every penny is a life for a man on the front line. It's a bullet.
Right.
I'm not going to say it's simple. It's not simple, but you have to do it. You have to approach it like this. And in a country, if you're at war, you have to get the best people in the country that can do this, doing it. You have to say, I'm sorry, you can't work with that company. You've got to come and do this. Or company, give him to us for 2 days a week to be the planner, to be the expert engineer, to be the scientist for the Ministry of Defence. Do we have a defense scientist?
Well, I'm sure we do. I'm not sure if there is a lot of those, but I'm pretty sure we do have some.
You would think you would hear about him.
But that's quite okay if I do not hear. Potentially they're working on some secret missile project.
Hopefully they're working on something instead of Taurus.
Probably,
yes,
probably.
Yeah. Because things are coming up.
Or like Russian, Indian Brahmos would be
Ukraine is producing new things. The question is can we produce more, and can we produce faster, and can we produce different? And, to a level that means that society has not got to be producing things instead of government.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But that takes a relationship with society to actually and the dynamics of that are really difficult.
Okay, so at least we have some outlines for the future.
Thank you very
much. Thank you very much for your expertise. That was extremely valuable. Thank you very much for watching and listening to Talking Substance. My name is Alina Hrytsenko, and we're gonna see and hear you in the next episode. Please make sure to like and subscribe this one.